let's raise the big questions. Airlines, airports, have they been caught napping by the fog? Why is there no plan in advance for the fog? Who has let down the flyers of the country? The airlines, the aviation authorities? Those are the questions we'll raise. I'm joined by Lloyd Mathias, senior business executive. He's a passenger whose flight was delayed yesterday by almost 12 hours from Bengaluru. Captain A.D. Manick, former aviation instructor, Air India Employees Guild Training Institute, joins me. Jitendra Bhargava, former executive director at Air India, and Kapil Kaur, CEO and director of Kappa India, which looks at aviation for years. I want to come to you, Lloyd, first, because you were actually a passenger on a flight on Sunday. Tell us what happened. How was your flight delayed by almost 9 to 12 hours? What happened when you finally landed on the runway? You've got to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, Rajdeep. I think yesterday was unusual, but really, really badly handled by the airline. In short, I was at a 7:30 p.m. flight from Bangalore to Delhi, as one would expect to leave home at about 5 o'clock. The flight got pushed back sequentially, first from 7:30 to 9:30, eventually took off at 1 a.m., at 1 in the morning, and that's fine. And then the 2.5-hour flight got stretched to 3.5, because at about 3:30, the pilot said there was air traffic congestion over Delhi because a lot of flights were holding. So we eventually touched down at 4:30 in the morning. Now that's where it didn't end. At that point in time, because of poor visibility, they couldn't get a tow vehicle to lead the aircraft to an aero bridge. That took an hour and a half. Eventually made it to the aero bridge at 6 in the morning.
No, hold on. You're saying your flight lands in Delhi at 4 a.m., but you're waiting at the runway to get a parking bay, and you eventually park at 6 a.m., 2 hours later.
Absolutely. It's IC 509. It lands at 4:15 a.m. It eventually gets to a parking bay at 5:45, closer to 6 a.m. And then the baggage takes another hour. So the baggage comes out closer to 6:45. So you get home at 7:30 in the morning. Right? That's how bad it is. And I think my issue is...
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think my issue is two parts. I think one is the really tardy communication. I think at no point did the pilot say anything about that hour's wait in Delhi airport on the tarmac in an aircraft. Absolutely no communication from the flight crew or from the cockpit crew. I think that was making everyone really uncomfortable and very restless within the flight.
Once you were in the flight, how long did it take before you finally took off? Because one of the big concerns that passengers had, I know that former Comptroller and Auditor General of Vinod Rai had rung me up yesterday saying he was sitting in the plane for 2 hours. I was traveling to Lucknow and eventually went back home because the flight was delayed beyond 6 hours. But I want to understand from you, was there no communication, or when you were in the flight, did you have to wait at inside the flight for an hour or so?
Mercifully not, Rajdeep. At the takeoff point, we just waited for an hour in the aircraft. It was a little unduly long, but not unusually. I mean, 1 hour was manageable. I think it's when we landed in Delhi and that hour and a half wait to actually get to an aero bridge, I think that was excruciating and really painful.
You know, Jitendra Bhargava, you're hearing from Lloyd Mathias, who himself is a senior marketing executive, has worked at the top of several companies. What's the sense? Is it that airline companies are to blame for this? Is it the Airports Authority of India, the Delhi International Airport, or any private airport operator? Who is to blame particularly for the lack of communication? You can't, the fog is something out of their control, but communication in real time, which the DGCA is now calling for, is the very least that passengers will accept.
Deep, his experience yesterday is not an isolated case. Because of the fog, many flights originating from Delhi got delayed and had a cascading effect on flights originating from other cities in the country. Passengers do get affected, no doubt. Airlines also get affected, is also a reality. What happens is that airline staffing structure
your video is
for
gone.
a
Can you get
certain
your
number of passengers to be handled.
Yeah, we're
now,
getting
what
your
you
video
have
back.
when the flight gets delayed and multiple flights get delayed, you have a large number of passengers on hand at the airport. Can you cope with that?
I'm going to come to you in a moment. Your video has gone off, so we'll come to you in a moment. But Kapil Kaur, you want to, tell us where the problem lies? Where does the buck stop here?
Hi, Rajdeep. Good evening.
Good evening.
First of all, I think the unruly passenger behavior is a systemic issue. It needs an institutional response. And there could be many triggers, and we shouldn't look at it in isolation. It needs an institutional response.
It's unacceptable. Let's be clear. Whether you're delayed by 3 or 4 hours, you cannot assault a pilot. That's unacceptable.
I'm coming to that. I'm saying the normal air rage or the unruly passenger behavior needs an institutional response.
Right.
The case that happened on yesterday on Indigo's pilot being assaulted is unprecedented, and I think the strictest punishment should happen to the concerned passenger. But generally speaking, we need to tackle unruly behavior, air rage in a more institutional manner, and the triggers for this, which are the December period, Rajdeep, the December period in January, which is congested, the traffic is at peak, there is fog, there are other multiple factors that result in the kind of experience that passenger has. That is a different issue, and we can take this separately. But my view is that the passenger unruly behavior needs an institutional response.
No, that I take. But where does the accountability stop for the lack of communication? The fact that there is no real-time communication, an airline like Indigo, which has a monopoly, which is almost a monopoly at times, seems to, is being accused now of not giving enough information to passengers to take them for granted.
So, Rajdeep, that's correct. During the December and January, much that you would like to get your information system much more robust and stronger so that the passengers have that well ahead of time, you will always have a problem. If you factually look at what happens in December peak month, right for a month during, let's say, mid-December to mid-January or third week of January, is unprecedented. I'm not saying that you can't have a better information sharing system. I am not saying that you can't have a better, transparent and a more transparent information system, but it's going to happen. You can't avoid it. The congestion is a reality.
Okay.
What you can do is you can minimize it as much as possible, and I'm glad that the minister has taken a very proactive, as he usually does, very proactive measures, and SOPs are being.
Yeah, but there will be those, I take your point, but there will be those, Jitendra Bhargava, who will say the minister stepped in because the passengers have, it requires every time a chaotic situation for the ministers to eventually step in. You'll recall last year, the congestion that was there in terms of passengers entering the airport and crowding the terminal, and that required a new system to be put in place. Now, we're talking of real-time communication to passengers if their flight is delayed. Do you believe that is possible, that is something which needs to be done? Is there a model out there? And I come back to it. Where does the buck stop?
Rajdeep, the unfortunate part is that the airlines expect minister to prod them into action. Why can't they be proactive and take decisions? They have enough experience to know how to go about it, handle a situation of this kind. Communication part is essential. I'm a communicator myself. But the reality is, can you communicate, and what can you communicate? In a fog situation, a flight has got delayed. Is the airport staff in a position to say the fog will get cleared and we will take off in a couple of hours? The answer is no. So they use the silence rather than give a false kind of a thing or an optimistic view, probably in 2 hours we'll take off. It doesn't happen that way. This is a reality on ground at the airport. Passengers seek information, but they cannot be given. Let me give you a live scenario.
No, 1 minute. I was on the flight yesterday. My flight from Lucknow, from Delhi to Lucknow was to leave at 7:55. At 7 a.m. we are told the flight is pushed to 8:40. At 8 o'clock we are told the flight is pushed to 10 a.m. At 9 a.m. I am told the flight is pushed to 11:30. At 10 a.m. I am told the flight is pushed to 1 o'clock. Are you saying that's routine that happens all across the world?
No, hold it. Say, for example, you are at Delhi. One airline has a dozen airline flights to handle. You have the aircraft coming in from somewhere, landing, and you are going to deploy the aircraft in another sector. You look at various factors to decide which sector will we operate, and that is where the uncertainty comes in. You said, okay, this pilot will be taking there, the every flight and duty time limitation will come in. Will the aircraft get stuck there for next day's operation? So there are multiple factors that are looked at the things and then decided where it is. Now, question is, you take an optimistic view, like you said. They said we'll take off at 8:30, then at 10 o'clock, etc. They said, okay, first is the aircraft availability. Second is the pilot's availability. The FDTL will not come in. Then the weather uncertainty at some places, can we operate all those flights? Should we clear aircraft which has a larger number of passengers on board? Multiple factors come in. But communication is vital. You can always look at, there are some people who would welcome communication and said we were at least told about it. Then there are others who will accuse the airline that we were told repeatedly and they were white lies. It's a question where you are in a catch-22 situation.
I know it's a difficult situation, but look at it. The difficult situation, Kapil Kaur, has been aggravated. Look at Delhi. One of the runways has not been operational. The runway which has Cat 3, one of the key runways, has not been operational since December 15th. It's being repaired. I mean, surely this was, this was not the time to go. The one main runway that you have with Cat 3 is non-functioning in the national capital. Should that not be a concern in Mumbai? There was an air show for 3 days. Mumbai airspace was also locked in for 3 crucial days in a very busy tourist season. I mean, there are questions of priorities, there are questions of organization. Now the minister stepped in and said DGCA must give an instant approval now to this 4th runway of Delhi. So there are other problems also on the ground.
No, that's correct, Rajdeep. And one of the other things that you may need to factor in is that if Delhi airport has Cat 3B compliant runway, there are only 6 airports, 6 metros that have Cat 3B compliant airport. The spoke airports around Delhi airport are not Cat 3. So what Mr. Jitendra Bhargava was saying about the situation getting out of hand, it's because of the fact that sometimes the flights around North India don't have a Cat 3B operation and landing system. So if you don't have Cat 3B around 8-10 airports or 7-8 airports in the northern India, it impacts the Delhi airport as well.
And how many pilots would you say, Kapil, are trained to land in Cat 3 on Cat 3 airports? Are most of them trained now?
Almost closer to 5,000 are trained for Cat 3B landing. But normally when the schedules get disrupted in a national grid, it will sometimes be not possible to have a pilot who's trained for a Cat 3B operation. But I must just add, frankly, that you will again have such situations. You can avoid the severity of the situation. There will be pockets again between 15 December to 15 Jan, particularly in North India, that you may have a very, very serious situations because the fog, the weather is changing. And Rajdeep, one more thing. It's not, I mean, I don't know whether anybody is aware that in December 22, in United States, Southwest had to cancel 17,000 flights on the weather because of the inclement weather. In Europe, these disruptions are common. I agree that we could avoid it, and we should make sure that there are SOPs in place, information sharing system in place, customer engagement in place. But this is going to happen again and again. We can avoid the severity.
I take your point. You're saying you can't avoid it, but you can avoid the severity. But Lloyd Mathias, as someone who's worked in corporate culture, is there a fear that some of our airlines have become monopolistic and the passengers are dependent on them? Therefore, their inability to communicate to the passengers is becoming a big concern. That they tend to treat passengers for granted. They need to communicate. They need to have better systems in place.
Absolutely, Rajdeep. I think what we have staring at us in the face is the fact that there is a comfortable duopoly in play. There's the Tata Group that owns Air India and Vistara, and then there's Indigo. And there are a lot of routes where you have no choice but to fly one or the other. I think in that context, I think the airlines, recognizing that this is an annual occurrence, I think need to plan better. They need to have some cross-functional teams where they can, move passengers on either airline where the severity of this thing happens. The second part, I think being part of a service industry, I think they need to treat consumers and travelers much better, and their staff need to be trained to communicate. I mean, you wouldn't go to a hotel and expect for 1 hour to hang out in the reception before someone attends to you. Whereas in this case, there are hours going by when neither the cockpit crew, nor the cabin crew, nor the ground staff are communicating with passengers. And this only aggravates difficulty. And this is something that should have been foreseen. I mean, Delhi's and North India's fog between December and Jan is an annual occurrence. Kapil spoke about Cat 3. I think Cat 3 is in play. But the fact that all this reaches a point where you have 12 to 14-hour delays and zero communication with passengers, I think is completely unacceptable. And I do believe that having a duopoly in the Indian aviation sector is a big cause for worry.
Do you agree with that? That Jitendra Bhargava, we have a virtually, if not monopoly, a duopoly today in the aviation sector, and therefore at times passengers are being taken for granted.
Asdeep, absolutely not. You will recall we've done several programs where people have been have not been communicated the right position even 10 years ago when there were 6 airlines operating. Jet Airways was there, Kingfisher was there, there were many other airlines. It's the same scenario when people talk of fares being, because of the monopoly, fares going up. We had last year a severe debate on fare increases when there were 5 airlines operating. It isn't because of these factors. Airlines have no incentive to mistreat a passenger, delay a flight, cancel a flight, divert a flight. It is happening because of factors which are beyond their control. I've been only seeking from passengers some kind of consideration, appreciation of operational constraints, not in the normal situation. When you have fog hitting the flight schedules, aircraft scattered everywhere, flights operating, as Kapil very rightly said, Cat 3 pilots, when you roster them on a certain day, the fog doesn't come the next day. You need rest. How do you multiply it? And let's not also forget, in the year 2023, 133 aircraft got added, which meant 2,000 additional pilots. Can airlines afford to ground pilot for Cat 3 training so that we do not have it? And
that's a good point. That's a good point that I want to take to Captain A.D. Manick, former aviation instructor who's been listening carefully. Mr. Captain Manick, where is the problem? Are the pilots also limited in their choices at times like this? Are airlines, in your view, limited when you're faced with a severe fog? Is there a solution out there? You're on mute, Captain.
The problems, what we have been facing. Yeah.
Go ahead.
The problems what we have been facing, on a different kind of background and different factors involved. So the first thing what I was listening very carefully and I understand the situations, what's going on. My view on this is it's not the fault of operator, airline, where passenger go and blame and something. A lot of things are involved. It's a airport operator, Airport Authority of India, the regulator, DGCA, Government of India is involved. And it's a weather, it's a nature, and one have to understand.
So you're saying stop the blame game. You're saying you can't blame anyone.
Yes, I agree that, and that strongly we can't blame somebody. And we need to concentrate on have a meeting with the regulator and the airport operator and airline operator, and then.
No, I take your point, Captain. I take your point, but the fact is, Lloyd Mathias, that you're a passenger, you're angry today, you vented on Twitter as I have and many others have. Here are 3 experts virtually suggesting, look, there's a severe fog out there. Kapil Kaur is reminding you what happened in the United States when there was a blizzard in 2022. This happens across the world. Is that good enough, you believe, a response for a passenger today? That, look, please bear with us. This inconvenience is not unusual. Is that good enough for you, Lloyd?
Not really. I do recognize that the winter and fog is an annual occurrence in North India. I know it can cause severe disruptions. I think the manner in which it's been handled, the fact that it just took today for the aviation minister to kind of wake up and taken some measures right to the airlines, very fact that the 2 airlines have not been speaking with each other to accommodate passengers on each other's flights, the very fact that communication has been pathetic, if not dismal, I think a lot of this speaks of the fact that there is a sense of complacency, the fact that we can take passengers for granted. And in a modern world where there are lots of people where a lot of people are traveling, I think this is completely unacceptable. I hear all the 3 aviation professionals on the show. I'm deeply disappointed that an industry that's so large is so you can say so immune to consumer issues. I think this is serious. In any other industry, I mean, this would be an absolute no-go. I think this calls for severe penalties, and the aviation ministry must take it up very, very strongly with the airlines. Cannot take passengers for granted.
You cannot take passengers for granted. Let me give my friend Jitendra Bhargava a final word. Lloyd Mathias saying, don't take passengers for granted anymore.
Rajdeep, no airline takes passengers for granted. There is competition. There are people being lured.
Jitendra Bhargava, it's not as simple as that no airline takes passengers. You need better training. You need better HR. You need better reach out. Why do you think passengers are getting so infuriated?
Passengers are getting infuriated because of the experience they've had in the fog without appreciation of the constraints. They believe what matters to them is one single flight. What matters to the airline is the total flight operations, not for the day that they are talking of the next day. So there are various constraints that they have. Now, no passenger, let me repeat again. No, it is not in airlines' interest to delay or inconvenience passengers. They wouldn't take it for granted. Both the airline, Tata Airlines as well as Indigo, have placed huge orders for aircraft. If they adopt this policy of taking passengers for granted, how are they going to keep the market stimulated and fill up the aircraft that they're going to be inducting over the next few years? The growth of the Indian market is in the interest of the airlines, whether there are a couple of airlines or there are 6 airlines operating.
Okay.
And that's the biggest kind of bet that one can put on, that monopoly will not be exploited because there are far too many aircraft that have been ordered. And they will keep looking for passengers to fill up the aircraft.
Let me leave it there. We've had two very different points of view. Some from the passenger perspective, some from those who've been in the airlines. Clearly something needs to be done. We are proud of the fact that we have this open skies policy, but open skies cannot lead now to chaotic skies. You need better work both on the ground and in the air to ensure at the end that passengers come first, their safety as well as their convenience. I appreciate my guests joining me on my top talking point tonight. Thank you very much to all 4 of you.